bees almost continuously since then. So I'm more of a long time hobbyist uh, rather than a someone who went to graduate school learning about bees. I actually did my graduate school, but working with pests of sugarcane in Louisiana. So I am an entomologist. I am an extension specialist, but bees have just been a long time hobby for me. So I'm going to tell you about how I've done things over the years, and things have changed a lot over the years. So anyway, let me go ahead and get started. Oh, by the way, I'm since this is Beekeeping 101, I'm really trying to direct this towards people that are very new to beekeeping. And if you've had 5-10 years in beekeeping, I do apologize. A lot of this is going to be very basic, but I think it's important for people to understand the basics, and that really leads to more understanding of bees in the future. So with that, let me go ahead and get started. Part of my experience in beekeeping, I joined the Peace Corps in the 80s, and I worked for almost 4 years in Tunisia with the North African bee there. And that was really fascinating. I got to work with beekeepers who, as an industry, had been keeping bees the same way for over 2,000 years. And so what you see me standing in front of is actually a whole bank, probably is about 60 or so beehives underneath all that straw. Each one of those round circles is a different beehive that's in a long tube that's embedded in the wall, and they keep them cool with all that straw on top. And I was teaching them how to modernize their bees, move them into modern beehives, and manage the varroa mite, because in the 1980s they had varroa mite in Tunisia. That was a long time before we had varroa mite in this country. And I worked with 125 traditional beekeepers. That we made wonderful honey there. We made orange and thyme and rosemary and eucalyptus and heather honey. And the one thing I find interesting is they were selling honey for about $25 a quart back then. And today, here in Kentucky, people are selling honey for about $25 a quart in some areas. That bottom picture there sort of shows you what their traditional beehives looked like. They were about 1 yard long tubes, about 10 inches in diameter, and they would put the bees in there, and they would cover over the ends with a dried disc of donkey dung. I know it sounds pretty gross, but that's what they had available. So, and then I worked with them a lot, just trying to modernize their beekeeping industry, transferring colonies from their traditional hives into modern hives, showing them how to do that, and showing them how to take care of bees with removable frame equipment. They never had those removable frames. After I left the Peace Corps, I started on my own in Tunisia, worked up to about 117 beehives, was doing my own queen rearing, and things were quite interesting being a beekeeper there. So let's move into what I'm going to talk about tonight. So I'm going to cover the Beekeeping 101, which, how I look at it, is trying to get you ready to start beekeeping. So again, I'm going to sort of give you my approach on what I do when I'm trying to set up new beehives, and teach you a little bit about the basics on bee biology. So with that, so if you're going to become a beekeeper, will you get stung? Yeah, I would say you will at some point. One thing to ask yourself: are you allergic to beehives? And what that means to be allergic is not get stung and the next day it swells up and your hand swells up for a week, and it's hot and scratchy. That's a normal reaction to bees. When you're allergic, you tend to have more systemic reactions throughout your body. I mean, I had A student worked for me. When he would get stung, his whole body would break out in hives. That's not a normal reaction. That's more of a hypersensitive reaction. And so that's what we really need to watch out for, because there's a fair portion of the population that is allergic to bees, and that can be in extreme situations, that can be a life-threatening situation and may require, going to the hospital and things like that. So you need to watch out for that, particularly if you haven't been stung much. Just watching your reactions to these stings. The good news is it's we have lots of good equipment and techniques to minimize getting stung. And I'm not saying you can always prevent every sting, but we can minimize the stings. We have good equipment these days, good protective equipment, and using proper techniques, you can avoid many of the stings. So, what's going on when you get stung? So, there's several things that happen when you do get stung. One is the bee's going to jab that barbed stinger into your skin, and when the bee does that, and it's a female bee, that, by the way, because the stinger is actually a modified egg layer, so male bees don't sting, but females do. It's barbed. It's like a barbed fish hook, and so when it goes into the skin, it doesn't come out very easily. And when the bee moves away from the area, that whole stinging apparatus and the venom sac gets torn out of her body. And that's why the bee stings only once and she's going to die. The other thing that happens is that she's going to squirt the area with an alarm pheromone. And what that is, it's a chemical message to tell other bees to come to the same spot and be aggressive and sting. And when you get stung once, you may get stung several times. And so it's always good if you do get stung. I like masking the smell of that alarm pheromone. I'll give the site a puff of smoke or something like that, just to mask that smell. So the other thing that happens when you do get stung, that pollen sac comes out. And I know I'm a bit of a bee nerd, but when that happens, you're going to see that it continues to pulsate. And what's happening is there's actually a nerve ganglion, sort of a nerve ganglia that controls that. And it's causing the muscles to continue to squeeze on that venom sac. And it's pushing more venom into the wound. And so it really pays to get that stinger out as soon as possible. Now, I've read a lot of older extension literature, and they always would say, "Oh, get a credit card, to scrape it out." And it's like, when I'm talking to kids, I say, "Go get a credit card." Well, they have to go track their parents down and get the credit card. That's not going to work. I say, use your thumbnail. Everyone should have a thumbnail or something like that. And just the key is to scratch it out as soon as possible, and try and avoid squishing that sac and squishing more venom in there. But time is of the essence. Get it out as soon as possible. So people react to bee stings. I mean, bee stings are designed to cause a reaction, but there are some things we can do to alleviate those problems. Even if you take some wet table salt and smear it on the area, that's going to help. Honey will make it feel better. Sort of a paste with baking soda works well. There's a number of things that can be used to alleviate the pain and make it feel better. For people that are allergic to bee stings, they may need to carry an EpiPen. And that's nothing to fool around about. EpiPens are very expensive, but they can save someone's life. And so they are only issued with a doctor's prescription. But that's a discussion someone should have with their health professional. So I got a question for you. Usually I'm in front of groups and I ask this question, and people will put up their hands, and the first one that answers it right, I'll throw them a Snickers bar or something like that. I haven't figured out how to do that via Zoom. So let me just ask the question. Smoke helps to calm bees. So think about that. Do you think that really works, or is that just one of those wives' tales out there? And the answer is yeah, it really helps. And we've known about it for thousands of years. If you go to places where they have traditional bee industries, yeah, people know about smoke. Doesn't really matter what type of smoke. People in this picture burning straw, but you can burn pine needles or dried leaves or dried grass, burlap, anything like that, even cotton. But what you don't want to burn are some of the, like an old nylon T-shirt or something like that, because that's going to produce a lot of nasty, toxic smoke. When I was in Tunisia, some of the very old beekeepers had a ceramic apparatus like this that they would put some coals in there and they would stuff straw in there, and then they would blow in that big hole and it would blow smoke out through those holes. So they would make their own ceramic smokers just like they had done for hundreds of years before, because they knew that smoke really helps to pacify honeybees. So it's been used for centuries. Any type of smoke will work well. When I was in North Africa, what they had a lot of, because it was a desert area, was dry donkey dung. Didn't smell like dung, it was just hard pellets, and they used that, and it worked quite well. It masks that alarm pheromone. It makes the bees, instead of being defensive, protecting the colony, instead they react like their colony may be threatened by fire, so that they turn their attention to eating as much honey as possible, because they may need to relocate their colony and they'll need the energy to do that. So it really changes their behavior very well. So when I come up to a beehive, the most important tool I have is the smoker. And I'll get my smoker going real well. I'll give 2 or 3 good puffs into the entrance of the beehive. If I have any secondary entrances, I'll give those a puff or two. I'll open up that outer lid and I'll give a puff or two under the outer lid. Then I'll crack that inner cover and I'll give them another puff or two. And, give them a second or two for let that take effect. Then I'm ready to take off the lid and start looking into the hive. But smoking is always the first step. Can you over smoke a hive? Yes, you can. I mean, you can over smoke it that it's starting to choke the bees and probably starting to choke the beekeeper too. But you'll learn with beekeeping what the right amount of smoke is for the particular conditions you're working the beehives. Sometimes when it's a little colder and the bees are a little more aggressive, you're going to use a little more smoke. When the bees are very docile, conditions are great, you may not need to use as much smoke. So there's an art to using smoke with the bees. So let me talk about the type of bees you're going to see in the colony. There's really 3 types of honeybees. We call them different castes of honeybees. The first is, and the one everyone seems to be enamored with, is the queen. The queen, she's a diploid. She has pairs of chromosomes. She's the longest bee in the colony. There's only one queen bee in the colony. If there's more than one, they will fight. They will fight to the death. They do not. They're not compatible with each other. Her job in the hive is really to lay eggs. She needs to lay eggs, and most of those need to be fertilized fertile eggs in order for it to be a queen. And I have never counted the number of eggs a queen can lay in a day, but I've read that she can lay 1,200, 1,500. I've seen some reports of over 2,000 eggs a day. And what that means is that she can lay several times her weight in eggs. That's pretty amazing to lay more than your weight every day. So that also means she needs to be fed all the time, and she's usually surrounded by a group of nurse bees, and they're feeding her royal jelly all day. They're grooming her, they're taking care of her, and she's keeping up that egg laying. Now, at this time of year, she's probably not laying at all. The conditions aren't right. The center of the colony is cooled down a few degrees, and she's hopefully not laying any eggs at all. But when the weather starts warming up towards the end of the second half of February, so about a month from now, the queens are going to start laying again, and they're going to raise the temperature in the colony and start rearing some more bees. So the queen can live for several years. When I first started beekeeping in the 70s, some of my queens would live 6 years or more. I don't see that anymore. I'm happy if I can get 2 years out of a queen. So the lifespan's not the same. There's many more issues with bees than there were back then. So we manage the bees a little bit differently. So the queen in her life, when she becomes an adult queen, she leaves the colony several times for mating flights. Will mate with a number of male bees we call drones. She'll store that sperm, but after she's fully mated, she doesn't leave the hive again, except if the hive would split and they're going to make a new colony somewhere else. So the queen has the fastest development time of all the immature bees. She goes from egg to an adult queen in about 16 days, and usually anywhere from 7 to 14 days after that, she'll be mated and begin egg laying. So that's what a queen looks like. Don't focus in on the color as much, because the color can be actually quite variable. You can have lighter color queens, you can have darker color queens. But what I notice is that very long abdomen, that chestnut brown area with that bee in the center, as well as the longer legs. And there's a couple reasons why she has that long abdomen. One is to get the egg to the bottom of the cell, because she lays an egg in the very tip of the bottom of the cell. And the other is because she lays so many eggs, she has very, very productive ovaries in that abdomen as well. So the worker is also a female. So the queen is a female, the worker is a female. Anytime bees develop from a fertilized egg, they're female and they have pairs of chromosomes. So the workers are the ones that are most common in the colony. A really good, strong colony could have anywhere from 60,000 to over 100,000 worker bees in the colony. It takes 21 days to go from the egg being laid to a worker bee emerging. So instead of 16 for a queen, it's 21 days for a worker. They go through the 4 stages of complete development: egg, larva, pupa, and adult. Really, the worker gets its name because it does all the work in the colony. They're the ones that make the comb. And when I say make the comb, they actually produce the wax with glands on the underside of their abdomen. They take that in their mandibles and they form it into the wax comb. They seal up cracks in the colony with plant resins. They control the temperature by humidity and fanning their wings. They guard the hive. They produce the honey. They produce the royal jelly. They feed the queen. They feed the drones, and they feed the other workers. And later on in life, they're the ones that leave the colony to gather nectar, pollen, water, and bee resins. So this is what a worker looks like. That's what a typical frame would look like coming out of a hive. I have to say, a lot of times you're going to see a lot more bees on the frame than that. So that's a fairly sparse uh, level of bees on the frame. I think they took that picture wanting to show you what we call the brood or the immature stages that are developing on the comb. But you can see that the eyes are not huge compared to what I'm going to show you in a few minutes. So the third type of bee is the male bee. So it's the drone. And the drone with bees develops from an unfertilized egg. So it only has half the genetic material of the female bees. And I know this is sort of strange to think about it, but the queen can decide if she wants to lay a fertilized egg or if she wants to lay an unfertilized egg. It's up to her which one she lays. So the drones, even though they have half the genetic material, they're much larger than the workers. They're a little bit smaller than the queen, but they may weigh almost as much as a queen. They have very large eyes and no stinger. So the male bees cannot sting. They will buzz and act like they can sting, but it's all a bluff. There's no stinger there. Really, the only job the drones have is to fertilize a queen. And when they do that, they die in the process. They do, like I said before, they develop from unfertilized eggs. And it sounds like they have it pretty easy. They don't have any other jobs in the colony. But one problem is when the frosts of fall come, the workers actually drag the drone bees out of the colony. They're banished and they freeze to death. So right now there's no drone bees in the colonies outdoors. So this gives you an idea of what a drone bee looks like. In that upper right corner, you can see the really huge eyes that they have. In that lower left, you can see the size of a drone next to those four worker bees, and you can compare the eyes. The eyes are really a big giveaway. Also, they're just so robust and thick. And then in that drawing down below, you can see a queen with a worker in the middle and a drone bee there on the right. So honeybee stages. Bees are insects with complete metamorphosis. They go through various stages in their life. They don't start off as adult bees. They start off as an egg. And when the egg hatches, they get fed something. And all bees in the first 3 days of life or so get fed royal jelly. And what royal jelly is, does not taste like jelly, actually tastes pretty nasty. It's not sweet at all. It actually comes from a gland in the mouth of some of the worker bees. And they produce royal jelly, and they'll feed it to all the young larvae in their first few days of life. If that larva is going to be a worker larva, after that, they're going to change over its diet to a mixture of honey and pollen. But if it's going to be a queen bee, they will continue to fill up the cell with royal jelly. Now, the picture down below, if you look there, I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but that's what the honeybee egg looks like. It's always down at the very tip of the cell, and it looks like just a little white comma almost, and that's the egg that is going to hatch. And again, an unfertilized egg is going to become a drone, still get some royal jelly the first few days, but after that, it's just like a worker and it's going to get the honey and the pollen. So there's a close-up of an egg. I have been told as eggs age that their orientation shifts a little bit. I've not verified that. I've just read that does occur, but that's what an egg looks like. I think it's very important you be able to recognize eggs, because when I go into bee colonies in the spring and summer, one of the things I always want to do is verify that there's a queen in there, but sometimes I can't find the queen. There may be 50,000 bees. It's hard to find, one bee out of 50,000 all the time. I can do it pretty often, but not all the time. But the other thing I look for are eggs. And if I see a single egg that looks proper down in the bottom of the cell, I have a pretty good indication that there's a good queen in that colony. So you need to be able to learn how to focus on the bottom of the cells and find these eggs. And it takes a little practice to be able to do that. The other thing I look for are the larvae, and this is what the larvae look like. So after the egg hatches, you get a larva that comes out. They feed it regularly. It grows very quickly. That first week, 9 days or so, it's growing quite quickly. If it's healthy, it should be a nice whitish color, glistening like that. It shouldn't look shrunken or off color or anything like that. But this is a picture of some good, healthy looking larvae in the colony. When the larva is done feeding, the job of the larva is to eat as much as possible in as short as time as possible. When it's done eating, it spins a cocoon, and the workers seal over the cell with wax, and that's the stage where it transforms from a legless larva into a legged and winged adult bee. And so it's really an amazing process. So, and it takes over a week for it to go through that. And after it finishes that stage as a pupa, it emerges as an adult bee. And the first thing that new adult bee will do is it will chew through the wax that's covering that cell, and it comes out of that cell. So that's you're looking at the first day of a bee's life, an adult bee's life there. Now the cells for queen bees look a little bit different. So the worker bees, they had the flat cells in the center of the colony. Really, there wasn't a lot. Let me go back a little bit. You can see that there's not a lot of texture to them. They're fairly flat around that. But the queen cell hangs down vertically. So it's hanging downward. It looks sort of like a peanut that has been glued to the comb of the colony. And in that cell, which is quite large, the top of it is generally packed full of royal jelly for the queen to feed on. And the queen's underneath that, and she's developing. And in 16 days, she will emerge. And so the bees will help to protect that queen cell. They'll take care of it. And, if they're getting ready to replace the old queen, they actually may keep the old queen away from the cell, because she would actually try and tear into that and kill the developing queen. So the workers have to protect those queen cells from the old queen. So how do bees communicate? You can imagine if you don't speak a verbal language, you live in a dark box, it could be pretty challenging to communicate with, your 50,000 nestmates. But bees are very, very good at that. And what they use are chemical messengers. So they have all sorts of pheromones. We're learning about new pheromones. I just listed a few examples here. There's many more. But I discussed earlier the alarm pheromone that they would tag an intruder with. The queen has a mandibular pheromone. There's a brood recognition pheromone, an egg marking pheromone, footprint, Nasinoff. Actually, the bees in the picture are using their Nasinoff pheromone. That was a picture of bees that have just recently come into a beehive, and they're sticking their tails in the air, and right towards the tip of the abdomen there's a gland that produces what we call the Nasinoff pheromone or the locator pheromone. So they're releasing that and they're fanning their wings, and that smell's going in the air. And that tells the bees that are flying, this is where you need to come to enter the beehive. So they're very, very good at using these different pheromones. And without these pheromones, the hive would not be able to function. So these are critical to the survival of the bees. So what do bees eat? So they eat protein, and to get the protein, they collect pollen. And in the pollen, there's a lot of vitamins that are very important. There's sterols and other things that are very important for insects to develop on. You know, some people say, well, should we eat pollen? Is that helping us? And bees actually are very well designed and adapted to extract these vitamins and extract these proteins from many different types of pollen. We are not. Let me just leave it at that. Pollen is very high in protein, so 6 to 28% by weight. It contains 10 amino acids, so it's very good. If you're not familiar with pollen, that's produced by the male portion of the flowers called the anther. Bees, they will transfer it to the stigma, the female part of the flower. While they're doing that, they get covered in pollen, and they collect it and they rake it back into the pollen basket. So that right here on that bee on that apple flower, you can see her pollen baskets are full of pollen. Now, one thing that distinguishes honeybees from other bees is that honeybees, when they go out and visit flowers, they will only go to one type of plant for flowers. Not one plant, but let's say if they're out visiting apple blossoms, on that trip, they'll only go to apple blossoms. They won't stop at dandelions or go to wisteria or something like that. Other bee species will. They're not floral constant, but honeybees, they're pretty much single-minded when they're on these foraging trips. The other thing they eat is nectar. So nectar is their carbohydrate source. So they need both the nectar and the pollen to survive. Different plants produce different levels of nectar and pollen. And even the nectar varies in sugar content. So some nectar is low in sugar, maybe 5%. Other plants can produce nectar that's as much as 80% sugar. That's almost honey. There's a little bit of protein, not much, and the rest is water. So the bees will collect that they store it in their crop, which is, you can almost think of the crop as a pre-stomach, and they bring it back to the nest. They expel that from their pre-stomach, and they add enzymes to it to change the sugars a little bit. They begin extracting the water from it, and they put it into cells, and they'll continue to process that nectar until it becomes honey. And usually when the moisture drops below 18%, it's not exactly 18, but it's close to 18%, then it's considered honey by the USDA, and you may find it in the capped cells. And so I think it's really beautiful when in the late spring, when you can pull just solid frames of honey out of a hive, and you can see that they capped it over like that. I'm biased. I like bees, but I think that's absolutely beautiful to see that. The other thing you need to give bees is water. Don't count on bees going to your neighbor's bird bath. That's not being a good neighbor. Maybe not getting water out of that dirty creek or something like that. If you have a nice creek, that's fine. But you may want to have a good water source. And so a pan with some sort of rocks in there. So when the bees land on it, they don't drown. Even that chicken water with gravel there makes a really good water source. You want them to give them clean water. You want it to be easy to refill, and you want it to be in a site where it's not going to cause a lot of nuisance, particularly if you live in an area where you have close neighbors. So, my next question for you to think about: does eating local honey help reduce pollen allergies? So think about that. You know, you hear that, oh yeah, wives' tale is that you eat local honey, you're not going to have allergies. Is that true, or is that a wives' tale? Well, the answer is there's actually some truth to that. That I've seen some papers. I think the last paper I saw came out of Yale, and they said some types of honey that were collected locally from certain flowers that can give people certain types of allergies. Now, if that's not enough caveats in that sentence, uh, that they can reduce the sensitivity of mucous membranes. And so there is some evidence that eating local honey can help to a certain extent with some allergies. So yeah, there is some positives to eating local honey. So as a new beekeeper, you know what, one of the things that you need to think about is how much equipment do I need to purchase. And what I recommend for new beekeepers is, you know, start with either 2 or 3 colonies. That's what I consider minimum. And each colony is going to have 2 deep brood boxes, and I say 3 or more, but at least the first year, 2 or more supers. And so the brood boxes, if you look at those pictures, those are those taller boxes at the bottom of the colony. So there's 2 on each of those, and above that are the honey supers. And you can see one of them has 3 honey supers. The other has 7 honey supers on there. So some hives take more than others. You know, there's going to be a bottom board, there's going to be an outer cover and an inner cover. Then inside that, each of those boxes are going to have frames for the bees. So how I run it, and different people do it differently, I use 10 frame equipment. Some people like 8 frame equipment. It's all personal preference, how much you want to lift. And so I'll run 10 frames in those bottom brood boxes, and that's where the queen should reside, and that's where they're doing all the rearing of the bees. Above that is where I like them to store their honey, and that's where I will run 9 frames in my colonies. And the reason why, well, I'll talk about that in a little bit. Different, you know, people will run different types of foundation. Some people have the all plastic frames. Some people will purchase wired foundation. You know, I still use wax foundation, not because it's the best, not because it's the cheapest. It's just that's what I've been doing for 50 years, and I don't change very fast. So I use all wax foundation, and then I wire it myself. You're going to need to get some sort of extractor. You know, if you're successful, you're going to need to be able to pull that honey off, and you want to reuse those frames. That's how you really make the bees productive. And so, you know, getting an extractor, a hobbyist can get, you know, simply a 3 or 4 frame extractor. Big commercial beekeepers may have a 44 frame extractor. So it's one of these really huge things. You're going to want to get a veil, cover your head and face, and a suit. You definitely want a hive tool, a smoker, and you should expect to buy some of the medications to help the bees as well, particularly for varroa mite. You need to find the right place to put your bees. You know, excuse me. I have several places where I keep my bees, and it's like real estate: location, location, location. And I have my bees in 5 locations right now. One out of those 5 I would really consider to be a superior location that every year they do outstanding. Another location is good. The other locations they seem to survive at. So location is so important. You want good pollen sources. You want good orientation to the early morning sun. You want good air drainage. You want it to be free of nuisances, things like skunks and other things that are going to pester them. You probably don't have bears up in the Buffalo Trace area, but those are the things you want to think about. You also want to think about not making them a nuisance for your neighbors either. So you want to pick the right spot. You want a low traffic area. You want to avoid neighbor conflicts. Generally, I like to keep at least 3 feet between colonies. I like to keep 3 feet of empty space behind the colony minimum. 6 feet is better, but 3 is my minimum. And the reason is that's where you're going to work the bees. You need to have room to open up the colonies, look at the bees, to take boxes off, stack them up behind the colony. Really, the front of the colony is for the bees to come and go. And that's an area you never want to obstruct. You just irritate the bees that way. So everything's done from the side or the back of the colony. I like the entrance to face south or southeast. I like the bees to get a little bit of early morning sun that tends to wake them up earlier, warms up that entrance a little bit, and gets them out sooner. So I find that helps to make my bees a little bit more productive. In the past, I always tried to find places with late afternoon sun, and some of my bees still have that. I don't know that that's as important now that we have the small hive beetle. I've read some stuff where having full sun tends to be a little bit better for that. You want to have a water source, you want to have a windbreak, and you want a place that's fairly accessible, that, rather than having to carry these supers full of honey for a quarter mile, it'd be nice if you could pull a vehicle up, or a cart, or anything like that, fairly close to the colonies to save your back. So, like I said, 3 feet between colonies, 2 to 3 feet. I think when I was younger, I would say 2 feet. Now that I'm getting older, I'm going to say 3 feet. Slope the entrance downward. This is really important if you're using solid bottom boards. Now that we're using more screen bottom boards during the summer, not quite as important. And the reason, if it rains, you don't want water to accumulate in the back of the colony. You don't want that to be a funnel to bring water into the colony. So you want them to drain pretty well. You want to have a good weed control strategy around your colonies. Some people could use a herbicide. I use old pieces of wood. I've even used an old door that I put some cinder blocks on, and it kept down the weeds pretty well. But landscape fabric and things like that can serve, or gravel can serve as very effective weed control around the colony. Be careful with animal control. So this is what a bear can do to a group of colonies. I have never had bears. I've had wild pigs do the same thing to my colonies. I've had Brahma cattle do the same thing to my colonies. But possums can be another problem, raccoons. I also have some colonies down in South Central Kentucky that they get attacked by skunks quite a bit. And so I have to put skunk guards on my colonies. But, for different problems, you're going to have different solutions. But if you have animal problems, you have to manage it. Bees are too big of an investment for just leaving that to chance. So, I'm sorry. Wild bees. So, we're talking about how difficult it is to raise bees. Why are there so many wild bees out there? And you might say, is Dr. Besson crazy talking about large numbers of wild bees? Well, I can tell you, every spring I catch a lot of colonies. I get calls about Wild bees in homes. This is a picture out of a home. I get messages about people have found bee trees. I know on campus right now we have 3 active bee trees with bees in nests in trees and sides of the UK buildings, and so there are a ton of wild bees out there. Their bees are pretty tenacious. A lot of these wild bees tend to be from that old German bee stock, and they're pretty defensive. But that also means they're pretty hardy bees as well. So, getting your equipment ready. If you're new to beekeeping, you're going to have a lot of new equipment. You want this to last. It's a huge investment. A new colony can be $400 to $600 in cost when you completely outfit just the hardware, and the bees would be an expense on top of that. Do you want that equipment to last for 2 or 3 years, or for 15 or 20 years? And so how you prepare that woodenware will determine how long it's going to last. And so I'm very careful. I've seen what's happened when I've tried to cut corners, and so I like to properly treat my equipment. There's a number of things for wood preservatives that you should not use. Don't use creosote or pentachlorophenols or tributyl tin oxide or chromated copper arsenate, because these are toxic, and not only can they harm the bees, but they can contaminate the honey, and they can be toxic to you as well. And so these are not food safe materials that you want to use around your bees. I tend to use preservative free water repellents. One thing I like doing with my woodenware is treating it twice with boiled linseed oil. I will give it 3 to 5 days between treatments for it to dry. Then I'll put a second coat on it. Some people will dip their colonies into wax, but I've seen other treatments as well where they can protect the bees. You want to give the colonies 2 coats of good latex exterior paint. It really doesn't matter what the colonies look like. I don't know that the bees care that much. I like to have a little variation in color with my bees so the bees don't go to the wrong colony. They do pay attention a little bit to those colors. So having some variation, I think, is helpful rather than everything just looking like a white box in a row. Lighter colors are good. The other thing you want to watch for is when you paint these colonies, where I've had boxes rot out, it's usually the joints or the end grain. And so pay particular attention to good coats and good treatments on those corners of the box, and repaint them as necessary. I caught, some of my boxes may have 5-6 coats of paint on them now, and that keeps them functional for many years. Preparing the frames. You want to have goods. If you're not using plastic frames, and I have to say most people are using plastic frames now, but if you're using the old wax frames are notorious for sagging. In the heat, they'll stretch and they'll sag, and so you need good support, good horizontal support, particularly with those frames. And so I even if I get that foundation down at the bottom, I'll run some horizontal support wires with that to give them added support. I mentioned before about how many frames you want in the colony. I like 10 in the brood boxes just so that gives more area for the brood. But up in the honey supers, I go with less, 9 frames, and sometimes I'll even do 8 frames. And the reason is I want fat frames. Fat frames are so much easier to extract than those frames that come out of 10 frame boxes. It's easier to get that knife and uncap those frames with those wider frames. So that's my personal preference. Really, the bees don't care. So, next question. Is honeybee disappearance due to agricultural chemicals? We heard about this a number of years ago as colony collapse disorder. So, is this due to the pesticides that farmers are using? And the answer is, I don't think so. That you know, each year we may just have two or three colonies in Kentucky that are due to, misapplication of pesticides. Two or three colonies that are lost, but considering the total number in the state, that doesn't explain the large numbers we've lost over the years. And really, I think there's a number of factors that come into play. There's no one smoking gun. There's starvation and mismanagement and queen loss and disease and pesticides that come into that. But really, the 800-pound gorilla in the room is the varroa mite. The varroa mite and some of the viruses and other problems that it moves between the colonies. And so, if there's no other message that you learn tonight, uh, good varroa mite management is key to successful beekeeping. So how do you get bees? You're going to start getting bees. You can go out and from a number of these beekeeping supply houses, you can order packaged bees. They're getting expensive. They're not the price they used to be. Actually, the post office is required to transport bees if requested. And I know when I was young, they didn't want to move the bees, and I would always get the call to go down to the local post office, go in the back room, and get my bees out of their back room. But what a lot of people are doing now is they're starting off with 5-frame nukes. This is a great way to get a really accelerated colony. I've started with some 5-frame nukes, and in the same year, I've been able to extract some honey from some of those colonies. So it is a big boost. You can purchase colonies off of beekeepers that may be downsizing or retiring. One thing I've really enjoyed doing recently is putting out these bait boxes. So that lower picture is actually one of my bait boxes in my backyard, and I took a picture. That's as a swarm was moving in to that bait box. And I will typically run 6 bait boxes in the spring, and on average, I will get 6 swarms in those bait boxes. So I'll be capturing wild bees. Some of the bait boxes don't catch any, but then there's others where I'll get 2 or 3 swarms from the same bait box. As I take the bees out and put it back up, I can catch another one. And then, you may want to talk to your county agent or fire department or other thing to get on their list. If they get calls about swarms, you can come out and you can collect those swarms. So if you do order bees, try and get some of the earlier shipping dates. I prefer mid-April for arrival. Earlier than that, it's a little cold to shake the bees in. After that, I'm missing some of the spring. The first year, your goal is really to build up those bees as quickly as possible. So it's going to involve a lot of feeding, particularly if they have to create new foundation in the colony. So it's very frequent sugar or sugar water supplements and bee patties, which are the artificial pollen. And that can be used to really accelerate the growth of those very young colonies. And so that first year takes a lot of extra care to get those bees up so they will survive the next winter. So it's not easy to do, and it really takes a conscious effort. If you're looking at that picture there, those are basically Ziploc bags full of sugar water. I take a razor blade and I cut some slits in the top of the bag, and the bees will quickly, within a day, drain those bags of sugar water. As the bees grow, keep in mind you need to be adding frames if you're not fast enough. I This is a picture where I had a learning moment. I didn't add enough frames to that colony, and the bees beat me to it. So they just drew down those frames from the inner cover. So I've learned a lot. I don't leave empty spaces in my colony because the bees will they will fill in those spaces. Then it becomes a real mess. The first checkup that you have, it's going to be a few weeks after you install the bees there. I'm looking for those eggs, and you can see the eggs in the bottom of the cells. I'm also looking for the young larvae, and you can see those are very young larvae. They're floating on that royal jelly right there. When I see that, I know that the queen is good. Things are progressing just as they should in the colony. So that's one of the first things I look at. At that point, I close up the box and I continue to feed them. Have extra equipment on hand. You may have bought 3 nukes and you're starting 3 colonies, but you may get those swarm calls. So I always like having a couple of extra colonies that I can put bees in if the opportunity presents itself. And so swarming generally begins, I have it mid-April here. I would say the peak is going to be about the last week in April through mid-May. Swarms are usually they're on the limb and they're within 50 to 100 feet of the mother colony. They're very docile. They were at least very docile the first day they're there. If they've been there a week because of bad weather, they can be pretty cranky bees. But they will remain there for a few hours until the scout bees find a permanent location. This is not the permanent location for the colony. This is where they bivouac until the scout bees find a new place. So this sort of shows you where that peak swarming season is. Really, it's those April and early May are the high quality swarms. After that, it gets tougher for the bees to really establish a colony before winter. So, true or false? Is it illegal to kill honeybees or destroy honeybee colonies? The answer is it is not illegal to kill honeybees or destroy colonies, as long as you're doing it because they're a threat. If people spray bees inadvertently when they're pollinating their crops, that is actually illegal. But if someone has a nest in the side of their home and they're allergic to bees, they have every right to do what they need to take care of that problem. So it sort of depends on the situation. So bees have lots of problems. You're going to learn about this. This is not beekeeping 101, but there's small hive beetles. There's wax moth that will tear into the comb. The varroa mites down there in the bottom right. I think that's public enemy number one when it comes to beekeeping. There's tracheal mites. There's bee louse, which is another insect. It's like the sheepked. There are gut parasites, nosema, which causes a dysentery-like problem with bees. There's bacteria, the American and European foul brood. So there's a whole host of things. Some of these are common, some of them are not, but you need to be able to see the signs of this when you become an established beekeeper. So with that, hopefully I'm close to being on time. Beekeeping is a lot of fun. I wouldn't have done it for 50 years. My one thought is I'm just trying to help the bees. They know what to do, trying to help them and get out of their way. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions. Hey, I finished right at 7 o'clock, right on the nose.
Okay, is there anybody? Sorry, my dogs are going crazy right now. Is there anybody that has questions? You're welcome to come off of mute. Right? It doesn't look like there is any questions. I don't think. Hold on, let me check the chat box. Okay, you mentioned air drainage. What is that?
Oh, okay. And we think about that a lot, when we place apple orchards in the country and things like that. If you place your bees right down in a low spot where there's no place for that cold air to sink, what happens is you put your hive in a place where that cold air is going to sit there, all morning, and it's not going to warm up till the afternoon. So I like to place it where there's air drainage, where cold air can move downward down a slope away from those bees. Those areas tend to warm up faster, and bees being cold-blooded, the quicker it warms up, the faster they can become active. And so I like to be in a place where there's an opportunity for drainage of that cold air away from those bees. It can sink, further down the hillside.
Okay, we have another question here. Can you expand on how much space is enough space to be a good neighbor? How much space should be between my house and the hive? Considerations for dogs. I'm trying to figure out if I have enough space for a hive.
And that's a good question. I'm not sure there's an absolute answer, but I would think 30 or 40 feet is usually pretty good, as long as the bees aren't being disturbed. One thing I've found is if there are dogs that are constantly barking at the bees, if there are skunks and raccoons that are bothering the colonies, sometimes those bees will go 100, 200 feet seeking out people to sting. So a quiet location really makes the bees happier and can shorten that distance between houses. The other thing to think about, there's some things you can do to modify the area to reduce bee problems. And when bees leave the colony, say they have to fly over a hedge. Once they fly over that hedge and they keep going, they don't drop down, they stay at the same height. And so I've seen some people will have a 6-foot fence or a taller hedge or something like that, because once the bees go over that, they're not going down, and the neighbor may not even know that there are bees in the area. So there are some things you can do to help that out, but I would say at least 30, 40 feet if possible.
Okay. Next question. Do we have a honey flow time in Kentucky, and when they start and how many? Then in September is the last part to pull off honey.
So it depends upon where you are, what the plants are. Where I have my bees, I get a good spring honey flow in my best location. It seems like some of that, the henbit, the purple dead nettle really gets them going. Then it's followed by black locust, which is a good 10 to 14 days in May in some years when it's producing, followed by clovers and just general wild spring bloom. And that goes from the middle of May through the middle of June. After that, it slows way down. Now, what I generally do is I pull some of my supers sometime in June to late June, based on how much equipment I have. If I still have more equipment, I may wait later. And then I get that spring honey off. It's a lighter honey. I like that. But then I get ready for that summer dearth period. So, the 20th of June through the 1st of September, there may be nothing out there for the bees. And, you could think, if you have a lot of property, maybe you could plant some sweet clover or something like that to help the bees. But if you don't have that option, you may have to do some supplemental feeding during that period. But then when you get into the September period, you're going to get those asters that are blooming, the goldenrods, and there's a little mini flow in the fall. And in some years, I may be able to get a little bit. Other years, I just use that to help the bees stock up for the winter. It seems to fill up their reserves a little bit. But different parts of Kentucky, they're going to have different honey flows. There's some people out west in Western Kentucky, they do well on soybeans. I've never seen that, but I believe them, and they're getting good nectar from the soybeans, and that would be a midsummer one. You know, in Eastern Kentucky, they talk about the sourwood and other things like that.
Okay, next question. Do the queen bees fight over the colony, or what's the flow with queen bees?
Can you say that again?
Do the queen bees fight over the colony, or what's the flow with queen bees?
Okay. So queen bees don't get along together. I'm period. No exceptions. That you have one queen bee and it gets near another queen bee, and it's the battle royale. It's going to be the survival of the fittest, and it's usually the younger queen kills the older queen, and it's because that's their nature. There's just one queen that's laying eggs in the colony. Now, I've seen some beekeepers that do some funny things with using multiple excluders, where they can keep two queens in the colony and get extra egg laying. But that's a very advanced beekeeping technique to do that. So it's just their nature. There's only one queen in the colony.
Hold on. Sorry about that. I was talking and I was on mute. Next question. Is there a best time of the year to begin the preparation stage of having bees?
Now, yeah, really, another talk I do for beekeepers sometimes is, what are the seasonal activities? And right now is when you get your equipment ready, you mount your foundation in your frames, you paint up your old equipment, you paint up your new equipment, you do all that preparation, because by the beginning of March, activities are really going to start accelerating. By mid March, I'm putting up my swarm boxes. By early April, I'm checking those swarm boxes and putting lures in there to try and capture the bees. And so right now is the time when you prepare, you get all your equipment ready, make sure your locations are ready to accept bees. This is the time to do it, and you really want to paint your equipment now, because you want some of those fumes and things to dissipate before you put the bees in there.
Okay, next question. You talked about clover, white or red. I have heard that one is not a good honey type. If I need to seed, what should I plant as I have a large new farm?
White clover or one of the sweet clovers. They actually have, I'm talking about the white Dutch clover, but they also have a white sweet clover. They have a yellow sweet clover. The red clover is pollinated by bumblebees. I have never seen a honeybee going to the traditional red clover. Now, crimson clover, which is actually more red than red clover, I do see some honeybees on that, and I know there's some people that use that. They plant red crimson clovers, and I've gotten some benefit for having my bees near some of those fields.
All right. Are there certain flowers that bees really like that I could plant in my yard that may help draw them?
Yeah, there's a whole variety. What I recommend is you search on the web the Kentucky Pollinator Protection Plan, and it's posted on the Kentucky Department of Ag website. And in the back of that, they have lists of bee forage plants, and they're really trying to encourage people to plant native plants that are good for honeybees and other pollinators, rather than planting non-natives or invasives. This is really focusing on some of the native plants that are really good for our pollinators.
Okay. What cover crops bloom early for the bees?
Buckwheat, buckwheat's a good one. Not the best colored honey. It's a very dark honey. It's what we call a baking honey. But buckwheat gets up quick and starts flowering early, and the bees love it.
Okay. Let's see. On lots of frames, and you need to build them out. Do you feed them in the spring? Do you move frames around to force them to build out empty ones? moving from inside to the outside question. Added to this question, brood nest frames, do you swap them over um, out over time? And do you use the same frame management system?
There's a lot to those questions, but yes, I do move frames, but within a colony, and sometimes I even move them between colonies where I don't think they have any problems. But when I put a new super of just foundation on a colony, it's very difficult to get the bees to want to go up to that super that just has the sheets of foundation. So one of the things I usually do when I put a new super of foundation is I move up one or two frames that are drawn, and then I replace those with foundation on the lower box, and that will bring the bees up to the new box to start working. But I'll move frames from the outside to the inside, and I'll move them up and down to try and stimulate the bees to draw out those frames. Sometimes with very new colonies, if I don't have a lot of drawn foundation, I may swap out some frames from an established colony. I actually may move a frame or two of bee brood that's going to emerge in a few days, and I'll take a frame or two of foundation, put that in the established colony, move over some frames from a bigger colony just to help them out. But yeah, we do move frames around. That's one of the beekeeping practices to stimulate them. And even if I don't have drawn combs, sometimes if I have a box and they may be on the center 6 frames, I may take some of those undrawn frames from the outside, and I may move them in 1 or 2 frames just to sort of expand that box a little bit faster. Not too much, because I want them to be able to heat the center, but just a little bit to encourage them to go just a tad bit faster.
Okay, next question. Would having bees around a farm pond be a good or bad idea?
Well,
Or bad area, sorry.
I think it's fine. It depends on what else is around that pond. Like I said before, I've had cattle and pigs flip over some of my colonies, so I think as long as they're near the pond, but maybe on the other side of the fence, that's okay.
Okay. What do you use to keep skunks out of the hives, and what does it look like?
Um, I hate skunks. It's a piece of metal that covers the front of the colony, and it has these fingers that come down that are they're the passage between the fingers is big enough for a bee to go through, but it's too small for the skunk to stick their arms into the colony. What the skunks are trying to do, put their arms in the colony, grab as many bees as they can, and they eat them. And so it's a mechanical device that they can't get their arms into the colony.
Okay, that looks like that is our last question. If anyone does have any further questions, you're more than welcome to reach out to your ag agent in your county or horticulture agent if you're Mason County. And we're happy to help, reach out to Rick and definitely have him help us answer the question if we're not able to ourselves. Dr. Besson, we thank you so very much for being on tonight. Thank you for recording this. We will be posting this. I will send this recording to Macy, and she'll get it uploaded on the YouTube channel, and I will email out the link to everybody. So you'll have that. I'll also send you the link to the Kentucky Ag Pollinator Protection Plan that Dr. Besson just talked about. So you'll have that as well. And we will see you all next Thursday at via Zoom. Again, it'll be the same link. I'll send out reminders closer to the time, but we'll be covering honey processing and equipment with Tammy Horn-Potter. She's a state apiarist. And other than that, Dr. Besson, thank you so much for spending your evening with us. We greatly appreciate you.
Okay, well, have a great evening.
All right, thank you, everyone. Everyone have a good evening. Stay warm.
April, do you see that comment from Shane? Who would be the best person in my county.
Shane, what county are you in?
And
Menifee. You would talk to Mary McCarty. She is the ag/4-H agent there. All right. Thank you all so much. If you need us, let us know. Bye.